So now that we have looked at the building materials and their function as media of modernity in panel 1, we come to panel 2 on the architecture of the construction industry. It was precisely this industry that celebrated its triumphant advance in the 20th century and at the same time contributed massively to the growing damage of the environment. The production sites and global trade routes, which were often interwoven with colonial structures and exploitations, remained unconsidered. In this panel, our guiding question is, therefore, what physical activity, what social relevance, what procedural and changeable characteristics are linked to the materiality of the Bauhaus? To this end, we are once again shifting the perspective of historiography away from representative objects and architects towards events and activities. Once we leave behind our traditional understanding of architecture as a final product set in stone, how can we understand building as a co-production of material cycles, energy flows, and ecosystems? To experience this change of perspective for ourselves, we will also change the location of the conference later this afternoon, when we move to the Bauhaus Museum after this panel. But now, the materiality of the Bauhaus. It primarily comprises the concrete, the reinforced concrete from which the supporting structure of the skeleton construction was created, and the steel and glass facade. And in relation to our key questions, we will take a closer look at these two materials or building elements in this panel. We start right away with Kim Förster and the topic Polysius and the Bauhaus, Industrial Development, Global Markets, and Modernism in Cement Construction. Kim Förster is a lecturer in architectural studies at the University of Manchester and specializes in knowledge and cultural production as well as environmental, energy, and material history. In particular, he deals with questions of change in the construction industry with regard to social metabolism practices and strategies of energy and material flow. Welcome, Kim Förster.
Thanks, Stephan, for the kind introduction and also for the framing of this panel that I'm very much looking forward to with Monika and Katie in exchange. And also thanks for the kind invitation to Regina and for everyone in the foundation and the Hochschule involved in organizing this. And thanks for everyone in the audience for joining. So I changed the title a bit and exchanged the end with a versus because I thought it might be more appropriate, but maybe this is something to discuss also. So the Technik Museum Hugo Junkers, which I explored during a recent visit to the Bauhaus last fall, houses a dedicated space on Dessau's industrial history, notably the historical development of cement as mass building material based on cement plants by Polysius. The exhibit features, I don't know whether has anybody been to this space? Like, quite a few. I found it quite fascinating. So this exhibition features a diverse collection of objects, including publications, photographs, and scale models of cement works, underscoring Polysius' significance, not only for the city, but also globally during the first half of the 20th century, as well as Dessau's subsequent role as the center of the cement industry in the GDR era. Founded in 1859 as a locksmith shop on Brauereigasse, 43, so just opposite of the Bauforschungsarchiv, which Simon showed. The iron foundry and machine company after 1870 expanded internationally, initially exported to Russia, and over the next 2 decades delivered 70 grinding mills internationally with representations in Scandinavia and Great Britain and Ireland. And since 1886, the firm specialized in machinery for cement production, stone crushers, raw mills, and cement mills, etc. By the 1890s, then a general partnership under Otto and Max Polises, it had 70-folded increase in turnover. For economic, cultural, and environmental historiography, Polisius' role in global cement history is significant, gaining international recognition at the World Expo in Chicago in 1893, introducing rotary kiln technology to Europe afterwards, which marked a breakthrough for mass continuous cement production with labor saving and cost reduction. And after taking over the Brennhofen Bauanstalt Hamburg, another conglomerate of a kiln company in 1904, it became European market leader, producing the largest rotary kilns at that time. The Polisius works in Dessau has since emerged as a pivotal industrial site within the Anthropocene, as I have previously argued. After Austria, Hungary, and Switzerland, new markets across Europe opened in France, in Italy, Belgium, among others, facilitating concrete construction of a globalized world economy, the silos and warehouses that we heard about and that Siegfried Gideon, for example, wrote about, the ports and airports with all colonial and imperial trade and exploitation connected to it. And even before World War I, Polisius was exporting fully equipped cement factories worldwide, including to Cairo, Egypt in 1907 and Shanghai, China in 1908. By the interwar period, it was a key player in Dessau's industrial landscape, comparable to Junker's, emphasizing its relevance to the Bauhaus architecture and the construction industry thus. And despite this, Polisius' role in architectural history remains underrepresented, an exception being the work of Monika, which we will hear about more, and together with Robbie Fivers on Polisius' activities in sub-Saharan Africa, where it built plants in Belgian Congo, among others, during the 1920s. And the cement plant industry, in line with Katie's concept of industries of architecture, therefore warrants a historiographical revision to include the extraction, production, transport, and distribution of building materials. And the Bauhaus building would thus be one of those materializations. So based on archival research at the State Archives of Saxony-Anhalt and also an analysis of Bauhaus sources, I propose a parallel yet entangled history. If the Bauhaus contributed to the industrialization of construction through its buildings and pedagogy, Polisius did so via cement plant manufacturing. The link between the Bauhaus and Polisius, however, is unclear, with no archival evidence of direct collaboration, like that with Junkers, for example. And additionally, secondary literature on the Bauhaus lacks mentions of Polisius and cement production in general. And in this context, I think the cement plant room provides a relevant contextual framework to start with. So while absent from Bauhaus historiography, Polisius was a major industrial player in Dessau during the economically turbulent Weimar Republic time. As a leading international specialist in cement plant machinery founded on technological innovation, system integration, and early globalization. Throughout the first decades of the 20th century, Polisius had expanded its facilities. In 1907, opening a second factory further down on Brauereistraße, so just 500 meters away on the other side of the tracks, so to speak. And huge structures were erected of shed, assembly, and loading halls with direct rail access. Post-World War I, following the Treaty of Versailles and the collapse of the political and economic system across Europe, Polysius from 1917, then operating as a limited company, scaled up production, building larger, more powerful machinery and holding international patents and licenses, expanding foreign relations. Reliant on capital investments in technology, Polysius pioneered rationalization, implementing modern manufacturing methods and standardization. And producing solely in Dessau, Polysius became one of the city's largest employers, occupying more than 1,000 workers and engineers. Alongside Junkers, that was, as we heard, originally founded as a gas appliance company and yet developed all metal aircraft and manufactured steel engines, and also Barmag, the Berlin-Anhaltische Maschinenbau AG, another giant that built the world's largest gasometers, bridges, and cranes. Polysius rather benefited than from the hyper-inflation and currency collapse in 1973. So following currency reform in 1924 and economic stabilization through the Dawes Plan, Polysius expanded, and by 1925 had already returned to its 1913 levels. Although Germany that year suffered from a stabilization crisis, which hit the heavy industry hardest. This was the situation when the Bauhaus relocated to Dessau and reopened as a college of design in 1926, not far from Polysius, following the termination of the Weimar State Institute's contract in April 1925 amid a right-wing political shift and a 50% budget cut. And sorry, I'm working on a PDF which I didn't know, so I flipped through slides previously, and it's not in sync, which I hope to revise with this here. So in addition to the economic, Dessau's political landscape supported the relocation. The city's progressive social democratic government, led by Mayor Fritz Hesse, along with figures such as Hugo Junkers, actively promoted Dessau as a modern center. Yet there's no mention of Polysius in this relation to the relocation of the Bauhaus. So while Walter Gropius secured municipal funding for a new school building and the accommodation for students and teachers, the city's industrial and cultural transformation, however, underscored their interconnected development. The Bauhaus buildings in Dessau, over 300 if including all housing, were heavily influenced by industrialization, standardization, and prefabrication, with increased use of cement and concrete derived from regional cement plants. And it would be curious to trace those, which is hard, but I try to do my best. So this is well documented through construction photographs, as we've seen some in Bauhaus publications as a primary source then. The iconic Bauhaus building here, designed by Gropius, exemplifies modernist architecture with its hybrid concrete structure. In Gideon's words, the arrangement of a large complex in a spatio-temporal conception for its aesthetic transparency. Planned by Ernst Neufert and realized by Dessau companies, Gustav Neumann and Sons, also C. Peretz, and then Robert Richter, whom we've seen, who had previously built Polysius Villa, and also works number 2. It features a reinforced concrete skeleton enabling large column-free space and a glass curtain wall with many load-bearing and enclosing walls finished then in cement-plastered brickwork, painted white to resemble smooth concrete. And for the master houses in Dessau and Ziebig, Gropius employed innovative planning and construction using reinforced concrete columns on foundations of temp concrete, while walls were largely built from what we saw on the poster, Yucca stones, or no, the poster doesn't show Yucca stones, but it's this industrial waste product, slag, with cement as a binding agent, which needs to be mentioned. While he had experimented with this in Haus Auerbach and Haus am Horn previously. Cement plaster here was used extensively to emphasize cubic forms and create homogeneous industrial surfaces that negated the handcrafted character of traditional residential buildings. However, despite this attempt to build cheaper, the master houses were not economical, with cost reaching 69 to 83,000 marks at the time. And third, in Dessau-Turretin, which some of you might see on Saturday in this housing estate commissioned by the city of Dessau, the rationalization of construction industry reached its most radical form. Aiming at mass production and cost reduction, Gropius developed a modular system of precast concrete elements, cantilevered columns and beams with load-bearing walls, again of cement-bonded slag concrete, and ceilings employing prefabricated reinforced concrete beams, the Betonrapidbalken, using an assembly line-style concrete machine, Betoniermaschine, employing specialized work brigades. The contractor for Dessau-Turretin, Anhalter Betonbaugesellschaft, a civil engineering and concrete products company, also from Dessau-Zwiebig, otherwise involved in industrial construction of factory buildings, was drawing up a meticulously planned construction site setup and schedule plans. Accordingly, concrete was mixed on site with local sand and gravel, but shipped cement and transported to the prefabrication and construction sites. And cranes here moved on rails across the site, reshuffling prefab concrete elements, enabling an enormous acceleration of serial production as documented then in promotional films. And advertisement in the following issues of the Bauhaus magazine promoted efficient housing construction using standardized concrete components. Further support for structural experiments came from the Research Institute for Efficiency in Construction and Housing, evidencing capital investments on a state level in the modernization of housing construction. Cement was supplied from nearby cement plants such as Saale in Granau, near Halle, operational since 1912, or possibly Anhalt in Bernburg, both fully equipped by Polysius and either partly owned or fully controlled by the company. Different dimensions of cement modernity are highlighted by the fact that while the Bauhaus prioritized design, aesthetics, and reform, Polysius concentrated on machinery construction, market dominance, and profit generation. 1928 then seemed to have marked a pivotal year for both architecture and construction industry. Following Walter Gropius' resignation and Hannah Meyer's appointment on April 1st, 1928, the Bauhaus focus shifted from the artistic, Meyer even spoke of the advertising like theatrical, towards the practical work, including the construction process. And under Meyer, the curriculum was reconstructed. As he appointed civil engineer Alka Rudel from Dresden as a lecturer in structural design and statics, who taught material literacy and presented reinforced concrete as high-performance material. Meyer aimed to establish the Bauhaus as a serious training center then for architects and engineers by placing it on a scientific footing, but also integrating guest lectures on sociology, business, and including a dedicated construction department. Reinforced concrete construction was the topic of the hour. In 1928, the Bauhaus magazine reviewed several of those influential publications on the subject matter, including Gideon's Building in France, Building in Iron, Building in Reinforced Concrete, which was actually reviewed by Ludwig Hilbersheimer, and then Julius Fischer's and Ludwig Hilbersheimer's Beton als Gestalter. By then, Polysius had reached its peak as a global market leader. After 1924-25, the company expanded, establishing a testing facility and laboratory at the main plant in 1926. During a lecture delivered in front of the Association of German Portland Cement Manufacturers, an organization engaged with matters of quality, research and standards, as much as tariffs and trade, Max Polisius discussed recent advancements in kiln construction. He highlighted that Polisius had delivered by that time 310 rotary kilns despite competition from other countries such as Britain, France, Belgium, Denmark and Italy, while it expanded business into North and South America, Africa and Asia. A major breakthrough came through collaboration with engineer Otto Leppel to optimize firing processes. In 1927, Polisius patented the Liepal kiln, which is to be traced in the state archives to a combination of Leppel and Polisius and an innovative technology processing raw materials not as slurry, but as granules or pellets preheated on a traveling grate and applied at an industrial scale. Recovering waste heat reduced actually fuel consumption significantly by more than a third. In July 1928, to raise capital via loans, Polisius became an Aktiengesellschaft or a public limited company. Otto and Max Polisius joined the supervisory board and as industrial capitalists were liable for land charges of 1.2 million gold marks, with their sons Otto, Gustav, Walter and Gottfried Karl managing the company. This form of enterprise, a partnership of shareholders, promised greater accumulation power to generate industrial profits. And the family retained yet full ownership of 4 million mark share capital in 4,000 shares with no involvement from external banks or capitalists. After large-scale trials at the Adler cement factory in Berlin-Rüdersdorf, costing 1.3 million marks, the Liepal kiln was first installed in 1929 at the Heinrich Lass cement plant in Glöte. Capital-intensive R&D on the Liepal kiln to enhance combustion efficiency earned Otto honorary citizenship of Dessau in May 1928. Polisius' success was further recognized through honorary doctorates. Otto from Technical University in Berlin-Charlottenburg in 1929 and Max from Technical University of Braunschweig in 1928. And Otto Leppel himself eventually obtained his doctorate for the Liepal kiln, also from Braunschweig in 1930. So at last, this innovation marked a new era in cement production, with Liepal kilns selling well, becoming the most widely adopted globally. Polisius promoted its products, including the Solo and the Liepal kilns, via modernist multi-language brochures influenced by the Bauhaus graphics, although no direct connection, again, can be traced here. At this time, Polisius also ventured across the Atlantic and attempted to establish a subsidiary in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania in 1927 to convert hundreds of kilns. That was the narrative, at least. But efforts failed eventually due to market resistance. By the late 1920s, with the doubling of its capital, Polisius had re-established a global agency network, often through German capitalists providing free advertising material, boasting that Dessau built complete cement plants worldwide. And the other side of this would read Schlüsselfertig, turnkey, either wet or dry process. The company penetrated the international market through manifold brochures. Again, here you see the multiple languages. As an export-oriented company, Polisius was heavily affected by the 1929 global economic crisis, and the stock market crash on Black Friday in October 1929 had severe impact, also because of the collapse of the international credit system. This led to a drastic decline in foreign trade and industrial production of around 40%, which had impact on the employment level. The Polisius archive contains a report by the German Machine Builders Association with graphs on wage policy that illustrate this crisis situation. Nevertheless, books in the archives evidence that Polisius managed to continuously expand its international customer base, especially with the Liepal kiln as their main product then. A final chapter in this difficult relationship between the Bauhaus and Polizeius, indeed a rupture played out in the early 1930s, highlighting their ideological differences. In a letter to Fritz Hesse dated 20th of August 1931, Max Polizeius criticized the Bauhaus as a costly and misguided modernist project that burdened taxpayers in the private sector. He dismissed the Bauhaus building as a useless structure and describing it as a cement box, Zementkiste, with poor thermal performance, and complained about the lifestyles of the Bauhäusler, citing media reports. The letter reflects Polizeius' opportunism and radicalization, and amid broader political shifts. By August 1930, Hannes Meyer had already been dismissed from the Bauhaus, ostensibly over communist machinations, amidst political intrigue and financial difficulties. And the rise of the National Socialism with the September 1930 Reichstag election shifted the political climate to the right, leading to the withdrawal of foreign loans from Germany, with the NSDAP becoming the dominant faction in Dessau in October. Eventually, the conservative nationalist Polizeius family, influential in Dessau, exerted pressure that contributed to the Bauhaus closure and relocation to Berlin in 1932. My conclusion, if I can allow myself, I think I will be fine with 2 minutes. This episode in the history of architecture and the construction industry highlights the stark irony arising from contrasting socioeconomic, political, and cultural visions. While the Bauhaus aimed to promote social reform through the use of cement and concrete, particularly slag concrete, to create affordable housing, Polizeius concentrated exclusively on generating profits by producing large industrial plants. And this focus is evidenced by undisclosed income accumulated over many years, revealed in the 1980s by a history commission that investigated clandestine financial records, investments, shareholdings, and transactions. Following the NSDAP victory in the Anhalt elections in 1932, securing over 40% of the vote, the closure of the Bauhaus in Dessau became an inevitable development. This was officially enacted by the Municipal Council on 22nd of August in 1932 at the request of the NSDAP. In contrast, Polizeius continued its operations until 1943, expanding exports during wartime. Although management retrospectively denied involvement in armaments production or collaboration with the Nazi regime, the construction of cement plants was, of course, an integral component of the war economy from 1933 onwards, supplying large-scale Nazi projects such as the Reichs motorways, bunker facilities, and monumental building projects. Maybe to come back to the cement plant room. Furthermore, an environmental as much as an economic history would involve overcoming problems of appropriation and definition as cemented in Bauhaus history and architectural history. While the cement plant exhibit at the Junkers Museum is motivated by questions of who owns proprietary knowledge, since Polizeius attempted to transfer construction plans for kilns to the British zone after Nazi Germany's defeat, which according to the exhibition was prevented by the workers. I'm also concerned with the foundational role that cement played in society. Post-1945, Polizeius history diverged. In the Soviet zone, the Dessau factory was expropriated and became VB Zementanlagenbau, leading East Bloc plant manufacturer exporting to places like Cuba, Syria, Libya, and Dubai. And in 1955, the cement industry was established in Dessau, continuing the city's cement legacy. In the West, Polizeius relocated to Neubeckum in Westphalia and remains active as part of ThyssenKrupp Polizeius. Today, it is a global leader in cement industry decarbonization, so the narrative, because of the Liebherr kiln being recognized as the technological predecessor of the modern cyclone preheaters. And I would like to close with this. Thank you for your attention.